This is Hope from Pros Before Bros. Sorry. I know that was a little bit creepy. I filmed this video and I was like 20 minutes in, and I realized that I had like speck of paint like right above my lip here. Yeah, that I don't know what I did. Apparently when I was painting, I got stuff all over me. Go figure. It happens. But anyhow, I wanted to just touch base with you guys. I'm getting ready to go hang out with one of my friends that I haven't seen in almost a month, and I'm really kicking myself because I miss her so bad. We used to work with each other and see each other every day. And then when I got promoted, I moved to a different building and I don't get to see her hardly at all now. So I sent her a message on, I think it was Wednesday. It was right before Thanksgiving. And I'm like, okay, we need to do something about this. This is ridiculous. So I thought I'd make a quick video before I ventured out there into the cold to hang out with her. And the funny thing is, it's not even cold right now. It is 57 degrees here in Cincinnati. I'm so freaking excited. It's not even funny. But yeah, I wanted to touch base with you guys because I finally am getting my voice back. But also I want to talk about some of the books that I read, and a lot of wonderful books I read recently. I'm focusing on 3 for today, but stay tuned because I'm sure there's going to be another video out that is going to probably be exclusively on the audiobooks that I finished. But these are physical forms of, oops, hiccups, shit, that sucks. These are physical books that I'm going to talk about today, so let's just jump into it. First book I am super duper crazy excited about talking to you about is the book Jane by April Lindner. I'm going to freak up her name real bad. Lindner? I'm going to just show you guys. April Lindner. Here we go. I can't talk. My husband makes fun of me. He says I'm like the Ricky Ricardo female version from I Love Lucy. Youngins know anything about I Love Lucy. I'm basically his female version of the Cuban husband that can't speak. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about this book. So the book is Jane, and the premise behind the book is, what if Jane Eyre fell in love with a rock star? I love retellings to an extent. There are some retellings that I wish they would have never ever tried to touch, that they would leave it alone because it just screws up the whole dynamics of the original classic. It just makes it very swampy feeling. This is an exception to that rule. I still love to read retellings, obviously, and give them a chance, but sometimes they're bad, right? This is an exception. So I picked up this book at Half Price Books. I think it was back in August, maybe July or August. I saw it inside their bargain section. I think they have marked down to like $3 or $4. And I am absolutely in love with Jane Eyre. It's one of my favorite classics of all time. It always reminds me of my mom because my mom always used to like shove books in my face and tell me to go read. And that was actually one of the books that she would have me go read when I was driving her crazy. So yeah, I wanted to read this so badly because I love Jane Eyre, and just the premise sounded very interesting. So in this book of Jane, we are looking at our protagonist. Her name is Jane Moore. She, I believe, is 19 or 20 inside the book, and she begins the book with a decision that is very difficult for her, and that decision is to leave college. Her parents pass away in a very tragic accident. She basically has no money, or little to no money, to where she can't pay for the expensive tuition at this very prestigious college for women. And it's in the East Coast, so everything's so expensive in the East Coast. So she has to make a very tough decision and leave school and procure a place of employment that not only will give her an opportunity to save money so she could go back to school eventually, but have shelter, housing, and board, because she doesn't even have that in this case. So she ends up going to a nanny agency, or if you guys want to get all Victorian, you could call it a governess agency, where they work with usually well-to-do or established families in getting child care set up in their home, and it's usually round-the-clock child care. So she goes into the agency, fills out an application, is talking to one of the agents, and the agent asks her if she's heard of anybody named Nico Rathburn. Nico Rathburn is our male love interest here. He is our version of Mr. Rochester from the original Jane Eyre. She says, no, never heard of him. They are really happy she's never heard of him, because that means she's never heard of his music and the fact that he is like this rock star god on the planet. And they want to make sure that they put somebody in there that's not going to be like a complete psycho fest and obsess over him and not do their job that they are intended to be doing, essentially. So they're excited when she says no, don't have a clue who he is. They say, great, we're going to hire you and ship you out to Connecticut. So they put her on a train to Connecticut. She arrives to Mr. Rathburn's house, and actually it's Rathburn. It's Rathburn. I keep wanting to say Rathburn or Rathbone or Rathbone. The guy from Twilight, the Twilight movies. But anyhow, she gets out to Thornfield Park, meets Nico's daughter, Maddie, develops a really good relationship with Maddie, and yeah, that's how it all starts. She ends up meeting Nico, and Nico takes a quick fascination with her, and essentially a relationship does occur. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't want to spoil it for anybody that wants to read it. Now, I can tell you that there are themes in here that are very reminiscent to Jane Eyre. The theme of the lady that lives up in the attic. It's there. The scene where Jane is in bed, right, I think it's the night before the wedding, and she wakes up and there is a hysterical woman ripping up her veil. That theme is also inside the book. A little bit modernized for today's reader. And then, of course, the theme of how Jane meets Mr. Rochester, or Jane meets Mr. Rathburn in this case. And that is modernized a little as well, too. Instead of a carriage accident, it is almost being hit with a car. So a lot of the themes are in here. It's modernized for today's reader to make it very compelling for a young adult to pick up. I really enjoyed this book. I am usually a harsh critic when it comes to retellings because I love our literary classics the way they are, but I do see some potential for retellings, and this one is definitely one of those retellings done right. I ended up giving this book, I believe, 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I don't know if I've already said that or not, but I really enjoyed it. The only criticism I had, and this is across the border with all contemporary romances or young adults, and that is, why does the male love interest or the female love interest always have to smile crookedly? Why? Can't they smile any other way? Why are you always smiling crookedly? Why do you have to pull that Twilight shit with me? That's the only thing I had to complain about with this. I was like, why are you doing that shit? Can't you smile any other way? Can't you just simply smile? Just smile, smirk. I'll take a smirk. That's the only thing that bothered me about this book. But other than that, I love this book. I love the detail that it went into. And April, the author, actually did an author's note in the back of the book. And I've been reading a lot of the author's notes lately because I find them very intriguing. And it gives me a little background as to why they chose the direction that they did. And this one is no exception to the rule. She was talking about how she is, I believe she's an English major, and she went to a rock concert. and got the idea there. Really interesting, and I love how refreshing the story is, but still stays true to the original. This is one of those books that I'm going to say that if you have a young adult that is struggling to read Jane Eyre, whether they have to read it for a school project or read it at leisure, this book gave me the inspiration to pick Jane Eyre back up. After I read it, I felt so compelled to go get my original copy and read Jane Eyre all over again and enjoy it for the content that it was. It gave me such a fresh perspective. It actually made me very excited. It piqued my interest. So maybe that would be something that you should consider if you have a young adult in your life that is really struggling with reading an original literary classic. Maybe do a retelling, look for a retelling to kind of open them up a little bit, and then talk about doing the classic. One thing I can tell you, the way that I discovered retellings is out of desperation to get my niece to read To Kill a Mockingbird in high school. She came home her sophomore year. She was grumbling about it. I think she only had probably 4 days to read the book, and she procrastinated so much that I didn't know that that book was even due to be read. And she told me she didn't know what she was going to do. So I, out of desperation, as as a surrogate parent, if you will, decided I had to do something to get her interest in this book. And it happened to be one of my favorite books too. And that kind of started everything. With every classic she brought home she had to read, I ended up trying to find a component to go with it. So I don't think I was able to find a retelling of To Kill a Mockingbird, but I tried to find modern things to go with the reading to make it interesting. And I strongly recommend that for any young adult out there. If you're really struggling to get your young adult to pick up their assignment and read it, try to find some modern tie-ins to help them out with possibly enjoying that book. After me and my niece went through To Kill a Mockingbird together, and we did a lot of different techniques for her to remember the premise of the story, to remember key details of the story, she ended up thoroughly enjoying that book. It's now one of her favorite books out there. And I did that for almost every other book after that. So it does help. This is definitely one of those tools I would recommend for you if you're struggling to get somebody to read Jane Eyre. Tell them to pick up a copy of this. It's been out since 2010. So you can probably find a very cheap version of it on Amazon. And of course, April does have a couple other books out there. I think she's got 3 total, including this. But yeah, give this a shot. This is a great one. And the next book that I read that I truly enjoyed is another older book. And I think it's a controversial book in itself. It was released in 2014 by Meg Wolitzer, and it's Belzar. So here you go. This is what it looks like. And this book, like I said, was released in 2014. It's about a young girl by the name of Jam who gets sent to it's not like a mental asylum or a mental institution. It's a school for troubled kids that have mental issues of some sort, or have had post-traumatic stress disorder or anything like that they're battling. It's a place where they could seek refuge and learn how to cope with what's going on with their mental health. So Jam is sent there shortly after the death of her boyfriend, her British boyfriend by the name of Reeves, and she gets to the school. She's going through all the traumatic grieving process that you have with losing someone, which there's a twist with this one too, so stay tuned and read that. But one of the coping mechanisms is she ends up going into a writer's class, and she is she's told to read a book by Sylvia Plath, The Bell Jar classic, one of my favorites, and to also write in a journal about her experiences. Well, it turns out the journal has a mysterious power in which she has the opportunity to go back and reunite with Reeves. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the background of the story or how it ends, because like I said, it is kind of a twist. It's a page turner. And I don't want to make any spoilers. I want you all to be surprised if you choose to pick this up. Like I said, it's a little bit of an older book because it was released back in 2014. And I'm just now reading it. Don't know why. Because it does involve one of my favorite authors, Sylvia Plath. I absolutely adore Sylvia Plath, and it was nice to see a mention of her in this book, if you will. So I really enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it 4 stars on Goodreads. Chelsea Darling Reads also gave it, I think, 4 stars too. She really enjoyed it as well. But there are some people that weren't happy with how some of the mental illnesses are pulled out in here, or how they are conveyed. Personally, I didn't see too much of an issue with it, and that's just because me battling depression, anxiety, I try to stay open-minded with everything, and I don't think it's easy to write about that stuff unless you're experiencing yourself, and even then you're going to run into situations where your personal experience might not add up to somebody else's and they disagree with you, but that's why it's a personal experience. So I didn't have a problem with how it was written. You know, that's just my personal take on it. I did really enjoy this book. And I ended up picking this up at Half Price Books as well. Back during their big clearance event for $3. I think I might even gotten it for $1.50 actually, because I had some sort of coupon. The only thing is I can't get the damn sticker off, and it's driving me crazy. So yes, another wonderful book. Really excited about this book. And if you are interested in any books with a little bit of a psychological twist in it, this book definitely is right up your alley. So take a look at that. Next book is actually a book, and it's the final book I'm going to talk about on this video today, that I actually read as an experiment, possibly. We'll say experiment. And that is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. And she's a New York Times bestselling author. You've probably seen her name pop up a lot on BookTube. A lot of people either love her or they hate her. Not as a person, but as a writer. And I will be honest, I picked up her books, after watching a review with The Insane Reader. I love The Insane Reader. He is just such a funny, very insightful person, and I enjoy all of the critiques that he offers. He did a critique on the book Ugly Love and November 9, and he didn't like those books, and neither did I. So I actually decided to do an experiment where I read a lot of Colleen Hoover books and then read this book as a final companion to all of those books. Granted, it's not a series. They're all isolated in themselves. But I really wanted to read this book because I felt like it would give me a little more insight about the relationships in her other books. So the common theme of Colleen Hoover's books that a lot of people are just not fans of is the theme that the relationships are very toxic. They're borderline abusive sometimes in terms of mental and emotional and verbal. They're borderline abusive with that, and it's a struggle to get through those books because of the factor that we have a very narcissistic male love interest and a female character that basically puts up with it. So I read November 9. I read the Slam series. I read Finding Cinderella. what else did I read of hers? Ugly Love. I read all those books, and I got the constant theme that everybody was talking about, that toxic relationship vibe that's not healthy for anybody involved. And I was really turned off on it. And I wasn't sure if I was going to pick this book back up, and I end up picking this book back up as my final read because I felt like I just needed to wrap it up and give my final review on everything. So the majority of her books I gave 2 stars to. Finding Cinderella I gave 1 star to because I just found it very trite, overdone, tropey, and just not realistic. A lot of them aren't realistic, but that one especially was not realistic. Ended up picking this one up, and this one follows the story of Lily. And she basically is a 20-something-year-old that moves from Maine to Boston in hopes of starting anew after her father's death. Her father dies, and she has a very unhealthy relationship with her father because he was physically, emotionally, and physically abusive to both her mother and herself. The story begins with her being on a rooftop where she is thinking about her father's funeral and the fact that she had literally nothing to say. She froze at the podium when it came her turn to talk about her father's remembrance. And she ends up meeting at this time a gentleman by the name of Ryle, who is a neurosurgeon. He immediately, you get red flags all over this guy because he comes up. How they meet is he comes up to the top of the roof. He comes up to the rooftop and he starts waging war against the patio furniture, kicking it to shit and back, cussing and carrying on, and just not. It's clear that there's something wrong with him. He's got anger issues. She meets him. They end up talking. He ends up saying, in a very very dirty, very vulgar way, that he wants to sleep with her. I'm not going to say what exactly he says. I'll leave that to your imagination. And she decides a couple days later, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do this. So they enter a very sexually lustful relationship. It finally develops into them having a relationship where they call themselves boyfriend and girlfriend. Then fast forward like a couple months later, they run off to Vegas and they get married, and that's when things really start getting bad. Throughout the whole relationship, he has anger issues where he gets jealous if she talks to guys or mention guys or anything like that, or if she says something he considers off color, he gets pissed about it. And then when they get married, that's when he gets abusive. He pushes, and there's one scene that is a trigger. They talk about an assault, a possible assault where the girl almost gets assaulted. So it's a really difficult read to get through if you've been in her shoes. A lot of people don't like Colleen's writing, again, because of the toxic relationships. However, I feel like this book really opened my eyes to her as to why she writes, because she wrote in her author's note that she came from a home of abuse. Her father was physically, psychologically, and emotionally abusive to her mother. There's a part inside her author's note where she talks about him taking a TV and throwing it at her mother, and how that was something that has lasted with her all this time. And I can see why, or how, if you will, how it's lasted all this time, because it pops up inside her character relationships a lot. And I think a lot of that is internalized, where she doesn't even realize that maybe the way she's writing her relationships between two individuals comes off as toxic and very unhealthy. And I feel like that this book gave that explanation. Now I can understand a little bit why she has these themes in her book. So I actually like this book. I was shocked at how much I liked it. Is the writing perfect? Absolutely not. I wouldn't say that she's the next Jane Austen or anything like that, but I feel like she did a good job in portraying what it's like to be a victim of abuse. One of our things, and I'm guilty of it as well, even though I am a survivor of being abused in an abusive relationship, is why does the person stay when they have these horrible things happen, and why do they stay? And the simple fact of the matter that I could talk about in my perspective is you are always waiting for something better. You're always waiting for that day to come where your partner wises up and realizes what they're doing is not only damaging to themselves, but damaging to you as well. There's always that concept of, well, tomorrow is going to be better. And I think she touched base with this quite a bit. And then, of course, you deal with the guilt that comes with it. You don't want to see that other person in pain, because even though they're putting you through pain, it's one of those things where you don't want to see them being hurt, because it hurts you in the long run. You deal with that guilt. You deal with the what ifs, like what if I can't find anybody that will want me? I mean, that's something that is a very common theme in these type of relationships. And it's portrayed very well in here as well. I think she did such a good job with putting that perspective out there, because I did sit afterwards. I really thought about all the things that was going on. Even, like I said, even though I'm a survivor of abuse, this really made me think long and hard about what we look at as a society when it comes to the victims. We only see, the bruises, and we only see, how terrible things are, but we don't really think about why that victim is staying around, and what kind of obstacles they have. A lot of victims have the obstacles of not being able to leave because of financial burdens. So we do get to see a little bit of that inside this book. And like I said, the author's note really made me understand a lot about maybe why she wrote her characters the way it was, because maybe those characters are a romanticized version of what she has experienced herself as somebody that grew up in a very abusive environment. So I am shocked. I gave this 4 stars because all of her others, like I said, all the other books I read of hers, I was not a fan of. I think, like I said, the lowest rating I gave was a 1 star for Finding Cinderella, because I did not like it. And the rest were like 2s, some of them 3s, very little 3s. But this one definitely was a 4 star, and I did appreciate the content that it had. I would definitely recommend picking this up. In fact, if you want to read any sort of Colleen Hoover book, I would say start with this one. That way you could get a little bit understanding of perhaps why Hoover writes the way she does, why she develops the characters the way she does. It might give you a little bit of a better understanding. And yeah, there we go. So those are the 3 books I wanted to talk to you guys about today. I did read some more books in my November no TBR, because I decided not to do TBR this month. I think I'm going to probably go back to doing TBRs in December, though. I'm still on the fence about that. If you guys have suggestions on how you do a TBR, or if you don't do a TBR at all, maybe you could tell me the reasons why you feel like that's a good fit. Definitely put your information down in the comments below. If you liked what you watched today, please feel free to subscribe. I saw I did get a couple of new subscribers recently. Thank you so much for putting your faith inside my channel. I do appreciate it. I see that a lot of you are new to BookTube, so I am planning on doing a lot of BookTube watching tomorrow. When I am working on my floors here in the house. I'm getting ready to replace floors in my dining room. and that's not going to be fun. So I'm going to be tuning in to you guys tomorrow. That way I can keep myself entertained. But yes, any suggestions that you have, please feel free to make a note of them below. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Stay warm and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye.